evening. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. Thank you for joining us. And those of you who are joining us for the first time, a very special thank you. A couple of things before I get started. Tonight is different because of the technology we are using here tonight. I'm always looking for opportunities to enhance the show, to enhance the viewing experience for my audience. And tonight, those of you who have access to iPads or iPhones, you should be able to view the show with the rest of us. And so you can give it a try. Um, Secondly, I want to thank those who are joining us for the first time, and let me take a moment to introduce you to CWS. CWS is about having conversations. I don't like to use the word interview because it seems so rigid. I like the fluidity, the organicness of a conversation, even though it's a question and answer. But I just like the idea of sitting with someone and having a conversation about who they are and what they're doing. They, the essence of these conversations is so that we can, the audience, can be inspired, can be enlightened, but most importantly, our youth can be encouraged, especially when they hear not only of your successes, but your challenges. How many times you fell, how many times you get up, how you might have overcome a particular challenge. And one of the things I like to invite people to think of, imagine a young person, a young boy or girl, anywhere in the world, listening to you and hearing how you might have overcome a particular challenge and recognizing something similar in their life and being able to use that as a catalyst or use that as a springboard to step beyond their own limitations and challenges. And imagine that person one day becoming a head of state or someone who stops a genocide, someone who invents something. We are in an era of mass inventions. The format, what we are using here tonight is because actually it's an amalgamation of many different pieces of technology. But let me go back to the point about this young person. Imagine that person becoming an oncologist or a geneticist, discovering some vaccine that stopped some serious epidemic. We don't know. What I like about this aspect of humanity is the ability to give without expectations and to give beyond ourselves, to give without wanting or needing to know the extent of our gifts. I like to use two analogies. One, a set of dominoes stacked, standing next to each other, and a long line, and you hit one, and then there's a chain reaction of one falling on top of the other. Now you might not be at the end of that line of dominoes, so you have no idea what it's going to touch or what other chain of reaction is going to put into place. The other one is more abstract. Imagine a stone being thrown into a lake, and it is saying to the thrower, "No, don't throw me, because there's no way I would be able to know the extent of my ripples." But that's not the point. The point is we do things. We commit ourselves to our ideas. We try to be successful, and it shouldn't be only for our own glory. Our successes should be beacons to shine a light on paths, to remind others that they too can shine. Success to me is not a monolithic thing. It's not a singular thing. It's not for just one person to just indulge. And nothing is wrong with that. But it's not just for, if I'm successful, it is not just for me. It is what my success can do to someone else or for someone else. And this is why I push people. When you have an idea, no matter how silly it may seem to others, pursue your idea. Commit yourself. You have no idea what is beyond the next step. So I want to take a quick break and then introduce you to our guest tonight. But before I do, just a brief thing about Black History Month. I am so glad, I'm grateful that I'm in this era to have witnessed giants among us. Some like Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela, Rosa Parks, Marcus Garvey. Um, and then there were those in the Caribbean which, were alive when I was growing up, like Eric Williams and Errol Barrow and Forbes Burnham, Eugenia Charles. Regardless of what their politics were, their policies, these were brilliant daughters and sons of the Caribbean, and so we must, in some way, acknowledge them. So I'll take a quick break, and when I return, I'll introduce you to our guest tonight, Nandi Keyi Ogunlade. Yeah, practice that one, Nandi. We are back. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. The lovely lady next to me is Nandi Keyi Ogunlade. Good evening, Nandi.
Good evening, Selwyn. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. I'm fine, thank you. Welcome to CWS.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, if I may take a moment to say a few birthday wishes to two women who are very special and dear to me. First, my sister-in-law, Marlon Collins. Happy birthday, sister-in-law. So I'm wishing you lots of joy and happiness and peace in your birthday, and I hope you have a wonderful time. And to my niece, my lovely niece, Abigail Percival, who told me that she's going out tonight. She didn't say whether it was a date or not, but uncles are the last to know these things. So happy birthday, Abigail. So Nandi, you were born and named Bianca Jacob in London, England, to parents from Trinidad and Tobago. Like the children of many fourth-generation Caribbean immigrants eking out the bare bones living in 1960 England, she was dispatched at the age of 5 to live with relatives back home. As a teenager, she immigrated to Canada, where she rejoined her father to attend York University. As a young student in the 1980s, she became an activist writer, a mantle that she has embraced for almost 30 years. She was a regular guest broadcaster on CBC radio and cable, and also wrote hundreds of articles for newspapers and magazines, including the Toronto Star, Now Magazine, Share newspaper, and Caribbean Camera, which were generally focused on improving life for Canada's Black and Caribbean community at a time when the racism pervaded the society. Nandi also began her playwriting career. Her comedies and ambitious works of historic content received critical acclaim at many of Toronto's prestigious theatre festivals, including Harbourfront's Du Maurier series and The Fringe. She also sat on major arts funding bodies and juries, including the Toronto Theatre Alliance and the Ontario Arts Council. Always restless, Nandi immigrated to the United States in 1999 to continue her studies at the City University of New York. While in America, her seminal essay, Still Shipwrecked on the Shores of My African Self, was published by the international peer-reviewed journal Changing English, Studies in Research and Culture, University of London and Taylor and Francis. Her work also appeared in special issues of New York's Daily News. In her continual quest for self-definition, Nandi shed her given name Bianca for one that she felt reflected her abiding love of her Africanness. Her continued dance with destiny in New York City placed her in the homes of strangers, taking care of their children, where she experienced firsthand the personal experiences of Caribbean domestic workers. This experience inspired her debut novel, The True Nanny Diaries, which continues to gain traction in the curriculum of colleges and universities. Always an activist, Nandi's main interest today lies as an advocate for immigration reform, an issue that is close to her heart. Several of Nandi's plays have been produced in New York. Most recently, Flambeau. We're going to talk about that tonight.
Yes.
A Caribbean musical set in the 19th century, played to popular acclaim at Theatre for the New City's Dream Up Festival. Flambeau will embark on a nationwide tour in summer 2014. Nandi, I had to read that. I really did. Usually, what I like to do is give the audience an opportunity to form their own opinion of the person through the conversation. But I had to read that because I was drawn to several things in there, which I'll talk to you about tonight.
Okay.
You were born. You were born in London to London, England, to Trinidadian parents, and sent to live with relatives in Trinidad. What can you tell us about growing up in Trinidad?
Growing up in Trinidad, I actually grew up in a small town called Point Fortin, and what I can say in terms of the positive experience about growing up in the Caribbean was that it informed everything that I did. That 9 years between the ages of 5 and 14. I think I left when I was 15. That time, that period, truly was the formative period for me because I know nothing about prior to being 5 years old. England, I remember brief things, but that doesn't inform who I am. But just that life in Trinidad, the simplicity of it, the Caribbeanness of it, the arts, the culture, that stayed with me and basically colors everything I do to this day. Right, so that's the positive thing.
Then you later migrated to as a teenager to Canada, um, and now live in New York. But what are some cultural differences that stood out when you first arrived in Canada as a teenager, and what was adjusting like?
Well, that was difficult because again, I really lived and owned being a Trinidadian for that little period there. When I went to Canada, well, one particular story probably echoes the general feeling of displacement that I experienced in Toronto. I remember I got to Toronto in, let's see, in the summertime, probably about July. So we did the adjusting. But when it really hit home for me, it was Christmas Day. Because my father, he's big on Christmas. So he did all the things that my aunts would have done in the Caribbean, do the curtains. We went to this place called Nob Hill Farm, which was like kind of like Costco. We shopped, we did everything, possible. Christmas is coming, and that was one of my favorite times in the Caribbean. And so the day of Christmas came, and then we had a tree, and I opened my gifts. And then I sat there like waiting for something to happen. And there was nothing because it was just my father and I. And then that was it there. Usually in Trinidad, people would be coming over to the house and we would be going over to their houses and the whole feeling of everything was about Christmas. And I wept from 10 o'clock all night, all day, all night. I wept for the rest of Christmas. Till my father, he was so... not looking back now, I could see how we would be disappointed with that after he put all that effort. He actually left and went somewhere else. And he said, "Are you coming?" And he had a girlfriend at the time. And he said, "Are you going to come? Let's go." And I said, "No, I don't want to go." So he left me and he went. Looking back now, I could see why, he would be, And my aunt actually came and picked me up and I spent, Christmas night over there. So that basically showed how I was displaced, how I felt going there. But what saved me was there was a library there called Toronto Public Library, Parkdale Library branch. And there's a Trinidadian woman who helmed that library for like 20, probably 30 years. Her name is Dr. Rita Cox. And she actually built a collection of the largest Black and Caribbean collection in any library in Canada. And it so happened it was walking distance from our home. And that's where basically I found solace, where I discovered Achebe, where I would, commune with Samuel Selvon and the Lonely Londoners. So that that period there, that's how I coped with, being displaced, just embracing literature in our way.
And talking about have Trinidad and having just come from there and the disappointment and so on. What are some values or principles that you remember learning in Trinidad that helped to shape who you are today?
Well, there was, again, positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Value system is that, you just listen to your parents. It's just
Yeah.
the way it is. You listen, you do, they know better. And you don't talk back, you don't do. So a lot of the things that I learned growing up, I raised my daughter the same way, just that I don't do some of the other things they did to make you learn the lessons. I communicate verbally as opposed to, the other way, the physical way,
yeah.
which is what they knew then. That's part of the value system. But the other thing I learned is that I was one of the unfortunate ones who got sent back. And that whole sent back to me really ruined a whole generation of our Caribbean people, right? You go back and then, you kind of be your latchkey, even though you belong to someone, you don't belong to your parents. So that whole feeling of being apart but a part, being a part but apart, that was big for me. So, even with my own daughter, it's like, listen, if we got to live in a park, we're going to live in that park together. I'm not sending you anywhere. So there were many things in the society that were good, but there were also a lot of things that I feel tore us apart as a people, and particularly as an African race, because we were the ones that happened to. It was almost as though, you start something in the Caribbean, after enslavement, whatever was the crumbs that was left, you were able to build a society. And as you're building that society, here comes a post-colonial world, and everybody, families get split apart again because people migrate, or they send it, and then when they couldn't handle it, they send their children back. And honestly, I think that it destroyed a lot of us. I feel it to this day.
Um, can you give us a glimpse into the 7-year-old Bianca? What was she like at 16? And who she became at 24? Well, let's put it this way. What was she like at 16? Who she became at 24? And who do you believe she's evolving into now?
Okay, 16 or 7?
7 first.
Okay.
What was she like at 7?
7, at 7 years old, I assume that, okay, at 7 I can answer that. At 5 I went to Trinidad, right? At 7 I just started getting into the culture of Trinidad, because I actually remember vividly the first calypso that seeped into my consciousness was Shadow. I Come Out to Play and Bassman. I always remember that, and I remember standing at the side of the road, like with the carnival passing in our little small town. So I think at 7, I was just getting used to it. I was getting used to the fact that I'm not with my parents. I had just started primary school and getting into that. So I think I was in a state of neither here nor there, just getting used to what life is going to be like now. I was always a big reader. And that was difficult. My aunt, she could read, but she didn't understand that value of that literature. So I actually used to have to hide to read. So I used to get in a lot of trouble for that, right? So that's basically who I was at 7. At 16, it's so funny. It seems as though you pick like these transformative years, because at 16, I left, I just arrived in Toronto.
Really?
I arrived in Toronto, so that was another pivot point, because now, and I didn't want to go. As difficult as it was in the Caribbean, I really, really liked it. I wasn't one of those who wanted to go away. But then by then, my father had left England, and he had moved to Toronto, so now it was time to do the rejoining. And then, of course, getting there at 16 and realize that when you lose 10 years with a parent, it's like, you don't know who they are and they don't know who you are. They don't know your struggles. You don't know theirs. So that was a difficult period trying to adjust to my father. Of course, my mother was in England, so she, I never actually heard from her again. From the time I was, I think, like 3 years old until I was 16, she wrote me a letter. So it was a big year. At 24, 24 was cool. That's when I started having fun. Because I had finished, finished York University. Finished York, no, not maybe just on the choice of finishing, but of course that was a big time for me, getting involved in campus activism and writing already for Share newspaper, which was big, and just being on my own and just figured that I could really like change the world. I can change things with my pen, and that's where I was at 24.
Who is she evolving into today?
It's funny. It's almost as though now, as soon as you hit 40 and you're going, you start to like look back at all the things and you try to find meaning. What does all this mean? And then in many ways now I see myself, not how I see myself, but I kind of get to know more about myself from what other people say about me. And then, I'm like, oh, okay. Even with the novel, the True Nandi Diaries, sometimes when you hear people talk about it and you didn't think about that when you were writing it, right? And when you hear about the impact it has had on them, and oh, you must have been so and so and so. Nope, just that's how it came out. So in many ways, I'm not exactly sure who I'm evolving to be, but I like where I am. And I think for a long time I haven't been able to say that, but I can say that now.
You later shed the name Bianca for Nandi. What led you to this decision, and how would you describe its effect on you and also those who knew you from childhood?
I don't think that there was a single aha moment that say, okay, you're gonna change your name. It was more of, I don't even want to say an evolution. I guess an evolution, because an evolution is anything that brings you to a point. But it was the whole potpourri of all the experiences I've had, and especially with writing, when I was writing for Share newspaper, because truly that was a big period in my life in terms of I did so much activist writing. York University, and hearing Kwame Ture and all the great speakers we used to bring to the campus and all that. A lot of the older, some of the older brothers on campus, they seemed to have it all together. There was the Muslim piece, Nation of Islam piece. There were so many things going on, and I guess I took all that in. And again, I've never felt settled as though, like I have cousins who knew who they were from day one straight to. My daughter is like that, but I never was that sort of person. So like I'm always taking in things and trying to figure out like what that means to me, whether actively or passively. So there came a point, I remember there was a time I was working in communications for the Minister of International Trade and the Minister of National Defense in Canada. And one of the ministers, the riding was York Center, which was predominantly Italian. And, the little old Italian man used to come in, oh, Bella, you are so beautiful, Bianca. Do you know that your name means white in Italian? And that used to drive me nuts. And not only that, I always hated my middle name because my father named me after a pen pal, an English pen pal he used to have when he was a boy. So my middle name was Trudy. So I mean like Bianca Trudy. I never felt like a Bianca Trudy, right? And so I don't know exactly when Nandi came into being. I cannot tell you whether it came from me, whether it came from somebody else, but it fit.
Okay.
So little by little, I started using it and all that. And then I came here, I was still using Bianca a lot. So there's still people here who knows me as Bianca. But at some point, I just couldn't deal with it. I don't like hearing it. But the most trouble I've had is from members of my own family, like the older members. My father, when he remembers, he does it, and I appreciate that because I know you're not always going to remember. But if you're going to tell me that, like some of my aunts, they say, well, we know you as Bianca, my cousin, and that's what we're going to call you. I said, yeah, but the man who made me and gave me a name, when he remembers, he tries to call me what I want to be called. So then I left it like this. I said, listen, the people who respect me, call call me what I want to be called. So you can call me. You can choose to call me whatever you want, you know?
Yes.
But no, I don't feel like it's funny that I even put that in the release. In the bio, because I don't usually even refer to that name at all now. But then at the same point, the effect it's had is that it almost feels as though it like erased a significant part of my life. Because if you Google Nandi Keyi, you would see, the book and the plays
Right.
and this and the that and the whatever. But I guess at that point where I left Bianca Jacob behind, there's a few other things. There are a few pieces of my work that might be Bianca Jacob, but it's been left behind so completely in a time when the World Wide Web wasn't as pervasive, that it's almost as though like that person didn't exist, right? So it's been transformative, and I'm the only person in my family. I had an uncle, actually. Now that I think about it, his name was Bertie Noel, but his father was Spanish, and he changed his name to Casimiro Lizama. So I guess he was the pioneer many, many years. But in terms of the African sensibility, really,
Yeah.
nobody else did this. And so I'm the something else child, You something else. I'm the something else child of my family.
What do you like most about your Trinidadian roots and your Africanness?
My Trinidadian roots has to be the culture, has to be the language, the way we cook, the way we talk, the whole ethnographical being of all that mix up stuff that means that we're from the Caribbean, right? That I just love it. There's no music I like more than Caribbean music, whether it is that I'm listening to calypso, soca, reggae, whatever it is. Right, an old Guyanese calypso by Spitfire. What's the guy's name? Can't remember his name right now. But whatever it is, I love that. I love the essence of who we are. In terms of my Africanness, the saying that I wasn't born in Africa, but Africa was born in me. That is so important to me. I don't think that there's anything else that defines me more than being African, that being a child of Africa, a descendant of Africa. That's who I am.
Let me ask you this. Who do you remember having a positive impact on you in Trinidad, in Canada, and today in New York?
In Trinidad, actually, my same uncle who I just mentioned, Casimiro Lizama, he had a big impact on my life. And I think it was not because of anything he directly did or said to me, but he was a rabble-rouser. He was actually what they call at the time a food inspection officer. So he would go and check, actually, weight control, check people's scales to make sure that they're not robbing the consumers in the market. So that was his job. But he became a member. He was PNM for a long time, but he stepped out and became a PNM, of course, being a political party in Trinidad, the main one, Dr. Eric Williams' party. And he became a member of the ONR. And I remember I was always fascinated because he had this big belly. He got arrested one night because he went to the PNM councillor's house and he wrote ONR in front of the house, and ONR, of course, being the opposing party. And I thought that was really cool. And he was trying to run with some young boys, and the guys ran away and they held him. But the whole idea of being an activist and that you don't have to stay in the mold, that was big for me. Dr. Williams was also big. I remember, I think it was 1974, 75. My aunt took me. He came to our small town, Point Fortin, and I think it was the transitioning of the private oil company. I think it was Trintoc. No, sorry. Can't remember what it was, but it was becoming a government entity. And he spoke, and I heard him. And that was, I think, transformative in terms of just being able to hear in person the great Dr. Williams, Basically, anything that had to do with politics. I've always been interested in politics in whatever form it may be. Politics can be anything. And so I think Dr. Williams and Casimiro Lizama, if I think Trinidad. If I think Canada, I think Rita Cox, who I mentioned earlier, that library she built. And she was like my mentor after a while, because I spent so much time in that library with those books that, after a while she came and she said, well, who are you, and got to know me. And, we did many, many, many things together in Toronto. Malcolm Street, Ibaye, as they say in Africa, he's long deceased. He got me involved in Canadian politics on a mainstream level, right? So I became the vice president of policy for the Yorkview Young Liberals, the Young Liberal Party being one of Canada's main party, foremost parties. And I think Rita Cox and Malcolm Street, I think they had the greatest influence on me. And there were many speakers I heard. Maurice Bishop came to our campus shortly before he died at York University. There were many, and I'm sure I'm neglecting Samuel Selvon. I had the honor of meeting in person, the writer, and he has had a profound influence on me as well, because he taught me it was okay to write in your rhythm, right? Your language, that's fine. And that was transformative. So I think those were the people in Canada. New York. That's a harder one.
It is.
Yeah, that's a harder one, because it's still a work in progress. And there were so many people in terms of the arts that I've met, that have, and it's mostly been an artistic sort of experience. Actually, if I have to call one person, it would be my British lit professor at CUNY, because actually it was her advice that birthed the True Nandi Diaries. Because I remember when I was babysitting, because I was here, I was undocumented, I had a child to take care of, and I looked and I saw the nannies, and I said, how do you get this job? And anyway, long story short, I started babysitting. But the first family I worked for, they were great. The second one, not so good. And I used to be complaining, when I come to class. And she said, Nandi, she said, you're in the trenches with the nannies and you can write. People pay for this kind of ethnographical research. So she put a whole different spin on something that was not a good experience for me. So I think that Dr. Susan Fisher, she would be someone who I would point to and say yes.
Wow. Tell us about your transition to New York. Looking back to when you first arrived in New York, what is different? What is different to when you when you first moved to Canada as a teenager?
Then moving to New York.
Yeah.
Oh, that was big. When I left Trinidad and I went to Canada, that was okay. It's a typical story. You're going to rejoin your father, your parent, your whatever after the distance. So there was that. Right? When I came to New York, I was coming as an adult, and it was a very sort of impulsive move. It was a move where people were asking me if I was crazy, because I left a perfectly great job with the federal government. As a matter of fact, I was, considered being on the up and up, because I was a young black woman. I was working for the Minister of National Defense in a communications position, high level position. I had like CSIS clearance, which be like FBI clearance kind of thing. And they were giving a package. But they gave the package because there were other people that in the office, older people that they wanted to leave. And when they gave the package, I took the package. So the minister called me, how much of people, what are you doing? This was not for you. But neither was the job. I didn't, I was not feeling that sort of commitment. Yeah, that sort of commitment to that thing that I was doing. And so I took it. And then I had a baby. I had this baby, and things weren't too good on the domestic front. And I kind of decided impulsively that, I think Toronto is too small for both me and my child's father. I think it's too small. Looking back, it's funny that the decisions we make. And I just decided that I was going to come. And plus, I wanted to go back to school. And I think life was getting clustered. Like, there was too much in my life because there was, okay, the baby. There was, the work was very demanding. I was also working for Share newspaper. I was working for Now magazine as a freelancer. I was occasionally working for the Toronto Star. When I come home, I couldn't even be still because the phone was ringing all the time, and I think it was kind of like sensory overload. I wanted to go back to school, but I knew I could never do it in Canada, especially having the child. And I just decided to come to New York. Really, people come to New York for action, but I came to New York to be silent, to be quiet. So when I came now, my aunt, it's so funny, my when she wasn't even, she didn't even really know I was coming. I just basically drove. I didn't bring my car at the time. I went back and I got my car. Basically, I jumped on a Greyhound bus with my daughter and came over and came. And she's like, I said, well, no, I'm not going back. She go, you're not going, you stay. I said, yes. And I enrolled in school, and it was able to give me the kind of peace, quiet, and anonymity that I needed. So when I got to school, knowing that when I was at York University, really and truly, my grades were not as they could have been, because I got so caught up in the politics and the culture and the this and the that and the clubs and the Caribbean Students Association and all that. Coming as a more mature student now, I know that, my primary focus was to be the work that I came to do. So it was a lot different because, as I said, I came as an adult and I had more focus and I could own my life at the second time.
If you could go back, if you were able to go back to when you just arrived, if there's anything you would like to change, what would that be?
I spent a good while undocumented.
Ah.
What I would have done, there was this guy who we were dating, and he said, we weren't it wasn't serious for marriage or anything like that. But he said, I can't see that I have something that you and Kenya can use and not give it to you. And I told my aunts, and what? No. Next thing you know, I would have gotten married at that point.
Oh.
I would have gotten married if it worked. Because you know what? If I had to give advice to anybody coming here now, I would say don't come unless you know how you're gonna be straight in this country. So that particular decision, I would change.
I want to shift a little bit before we go on a break. You're passionate about Black culture and Africanness. How would you convey that passion and its message to a group of 9-year-old students listening to you and eager to learn about their heritage?
The best way I could transmit my passion is to teach them to have a passion, have them to be passionate too. And I think the best way to do that is through literature. Really, there's no other way. And I wouldn't wait till they were 9. I would hope that I would be able to influence them before that. Because my daughter, for example, what I did, even when she was really little, I used to take her to a lot of, I used to have to check it out first because, sometimes you have to censor these things. But I would take her to a lot of poetry readings, galleries, spiritual occasions that may not be what we consider conventional in terms of the Christianity and so forth. But I expose her to a lot of things because I feel as though that this is all part of who she is. And of course a lot of books, so that when the time came now, she could own this. She is a voracious reader. Right now, she's in grade 10th grade. I still say grade 10 Toronto, 10th grade. She's in the 10th grade and they're studying fences, but she read Fences when she was 9. Right, August Wilson. So a group of 10-year-old, I'll say, just read everything you can in terms of your history, your culture, your heritage. Read it all. Read comedy, read whatever it is that you can get your hands on that's going to tell you a little bit about the complex people that you belong to. That's what I would try to do, to instill that.
Let's take a break.
Okay.
Let's take a quick break. We are back. I am Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS, Conversations with Selwyn. And the lovely smiling lady next to me is Nandi Keyi Ogunlade. Nandi, let me just shift to the chat room for a second. Someone said, Andrea CCB said, enjoying this, a most remarkable and captivating journey. Nandi, thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
You are a playwright, activist, culturist, and author. Why are you so driven, and where do you get your inspiration?
I pause. I pause because I've never considered myself driven. As a matter of fact, I find that I'm not driven enough, and because I'm a great procrastinator. So that is a work in progress for me to make sure that I show up each and every day in my life. That in every moment that I'm present, yeah. So in terms of like the inspiration for what I do, many times it's instinctive. Really, there are writers, for example, who that's what they do, so they write. I have to feel it in order for it to, and because I'm willing to feel it, it usually takes a long time.
Gotcha. I got that. You mentioned comedy.
Yes,
Something you
I'm
like.
funny. I'm
Something you like.
funny.
Um, do you find it helps you with your messaging to get the essence of who you are and what you want to talk about out?
Yeah, for sure. Because especially with when you're looking at Caribbean audiences too, that's what somehow African American audiences too. You have to laugh. They need that, right? But what you can do is to try to put in what you really need to say through this wonderful vehicle that is comedy. So I recently did a play called Mother-in-Law, and in that play, of course, my protagonist, my main character, had a green card problem, and everybody was just trying to survive in this New York, with the roaches and the this and the that. So people were laughing, but it rang true, right? So that's and you know what? I don't set out to say, okay, I'm going to put a joke. It actually comes out in my writing organically. It's just the way.
It's a gift.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
It's a gift.
Yeah.
What do you remember about your first play, and and what challenges? Right. What was your first major challenge, and how you overcame it?
Well, that was a big one. My first play was called Man You Must, right? And
Man You Must?
Man You Must. And I started writing this play about these, I think it's like, well, of course, I didn't know better, so it had 7 people in it. But no, of course, I ain't writing any play with, or Flambeau has a cast of 18, but I wouldn't write that play with 7 people now. I try to write 2 because I know if you're going to produce it, costs a lot of money. But anyway, so have this play, 7 people, Man You Must. So everything, but so I was writing it, then I finished it, and I said, oh, I have a play. So I told a friend of mine, I said, what do we do now? He said, well, we have to produce it, right? So I knew absolutely nothing, rented a place, did all this kind of stuff, right? One of the challenges, I'll tell you a funny story. So we had to get props, right? So we say, okay, we borrowed this from this one from that one. So we needed a bed, a mattress. So we went and we borrowed his friend's mattress who was living in a room, and shop up the mattress, drive on the 401, which is like the major highway in Toronto. And when we got to the theater, The mattress was not there. So I was so panicked. So the next day I'm looking to see if will a flying mattress kill anybody. But I never found out what happened to the mattress and I never heard anything. But the challenges were that I really just didn't know. So I really came into this fire baptism because I just jumped in and did it. And that was my first foray, both as a playwright and as a theater producer.
Well, tell us tell us about your first about your novel, The Nandi Diaries.
True Nandi
The
Diaries.
True Nandi Diaries. Sorry. What was the trigger that got you to writing this? I think you alluded to it just now.
Yeah, well, I could just, yeah.
And what did you hope it would have accomplished?
Why I corrected you and I said the True Nanny Diaries because actually when I was babysitting, right, I met the woman I met, the brave, bright woman who left the Caribbean hoping to do, continue their studies, do this, do that, and then came and they got stuck because basically being undocumented. Because what I found out from the Domestic Workers Union, 90% of the nannies doing this work, women doing this work are undocumented, right? And what I found that I met this one older woman, and she was almost 70, and she was taking care of four children. She had to take care of these 4 children on the playground. And then around that time, a book called The Nandi Diaries came out. And it was about 2 young white women who were babysitting to get extra money. Of course, they were Americans. They were university students. So there was the element of choice. They can choose to do this or they can choose to do something else. But the woman I was meeting on the playground, they had no choice. So when that book came out, and of course, I said, my British lit professor was encouraging me to write this book. I wanted to write the true story of the woman that I met on the playground, right? Hence the True Nanny Diaries. So my book is actually about 4 Caribbean women domestic workers, basically babysitting to survive in New York City. 3 of them are undocumented in the book. And so, yeah. So that colors everything that happens from there. So basically, what did I want to accomplish? I wanted to tell the story of these women and the women like them, Caribbean women.
Recently, you produced Flambeau,
No.
right? Or
Flambeau was produced, but I wasn't the producer.
You were the producer. Okay,
Yeah.
you wrote it, right? A Caribbean musical set in the 19th century. Who did you write it for? And what is it in your journey that was telling you that in those experiences and stories of blacks in Trinidad in the 1880s, there's a musical narrative that must be told?
Okay. When I first met, Flambeau has been a work in transition for 20 years now. When I first wrote Flambeau, it was 1993 or 1994. Coming to think about it, wow, it's 20 years of Flambeau. And I was in Canada. What first prompted Flambeau? Remember, I said that I used to work for Share newspaper, right? Young journalist at Share. And there was this period of misappropriation, and it still goes on to today, wherever you go where there are African people of our culture. So I went to Trinidad, and there in a gift shop, there was a steel pan, and it said, this is a tenor pan in a steel orchestra. It was invented by our African and Indian drumming tradition, something like that. And I know that the steel pan was an African, came from, the children of Africa in Trinidad. Not to say that it being in Trinidad, being a Trinidad instrument that was invented in Trinidad, mean that it wasn't owned by all Trinidadians, irrespective of nationality. But it was created by Africans in the back of John and Lavantil and these places where other people didn't want to go. The African people of Trinidad and Tobago. So now that the steel pan was gaining respectability, all of a sudden it was created by African and East Indians. So that was one. Then there was this whole movement that, the French created carnival. How did the French create carnival? Right? The French Europeans. Yes, the French Europeans had their fancy balls and the gong, wear their fancy gongs, and they had their balls in the street in that period of Trinidad, early 19th century Trinidad. But guess what? If the French Europeans, white Europeans created carnival, you show me a carnival like that in France. You show me a carnival like that in Quebec. No, but you can show me one in Haiti. You can show me one in Martinique. You can show me one in New Orleans. Right? So the constant, you can also show me one where anywhere African people settled, you can show me a carnival like that. So the constant is the African. The constant is not the French European. So here I was writing as a, I'm a journalist and I'm studying and I'm writing. And then just seemed like everybody's just kind of like pulling on the African culture, pulling on the Caribbean culture and claiming it because now it's respectable. So when I wrote Flambeau, that I wanted to write a play to show that, so that African children would know the way it really happened. Right? And that's of course now it's fictional. The characters are
Right.
fictional,
Right.
and some of the situations may be the same, but it's a work of fiction. But I wanted to steep a play that was, I wanted to create a play that was steeped in its true origins, which is, the African people of Trinidad. And that's where that came from. So I think it's the piece, both that play and the book, the novel, True Nanny Diaries. I think those are two pieces that I set out with an activist agenda. Most of the things I write, it comes organically how it comes, but I did have an agenda with Flambeau.
Is Flambeau accomplishing what you envisioned? And if so, how would you describe your feeling?
Flambeau is accomplishing it. Now, let me tell you something about Flambeau. So, it was produced a couple times, had a few funny stories, but I'm not going to go into that.
Right.
But now I met a young man, a young African American called Lawrence Floyd last year, right? A Guyanese brother, Kurt Hardin, actor, had introduced him to the play and he fell in love with it. So we met, did the business and so forth. So basically, he was a producer. But what he encouraged me to do was to dream bigger than I ever dreamed before. So that way, so then Flambeau, even though it had its run, it went de Maurier, it won awards and so on and so forth, to start to look at it as the music, to bring the music into it. And I've always seen it as a musical, but I've always heard it, but I've never done it. So I ended up going through a whole process of reimagining, rewriting, and re-envisioning Flambeau. And then we got into a couple of the festivals. We chose the Dream Up Festival and we did that. And our play, we sold out every single night except for the Tuesday. Okay, we opened the Monday, so open midnight. Sunday, we open on Sunday, open midnight. Everybody house is full. The Tuesday night, okay, we had about 70%, and after that, it was just like word of mouth. We were sold out every single day for that run. We had 9 nights in the festival and then 2 nights in the Billie Holiday. Just people talking, because there was no advertising budget or anything like that. Just people talking about the play, and that happened. So it's been doing wonderfully well. And then, of course, beginning in June, it's going on a 10-city U.S. tour, beginning in North Carolina, a 2,000 seaters. So I'm hopeful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yes, thanks. So it's doing its thing. And I'm just enjoying the ride. I don't have the headache of being a producer.
Maybe.
But I get to enjoy it.
Maybe you should bring a few members of your cast on to talk about it.
That would be great.
Let's work on that. But I'm curious, what did writing it teach you about yourself, your mother, your grandmother, and in other words, what did it inform you about your heritage, that linear heritage from the women that came before you?
What it told me is that they always knew that what they were doing was important. What they were doing was setting a legacy. That they always knew that they were creating something, that we could have something. Right? So, David Rudder has a calypso, out of a muddy pond, 10,000 flowers bloom. So many times we look at the inner cities, quote unquote, inner cities of the Caribbean. Right? And even in North America, because it goes for all African people. You look at, the calypso, the steel pan, the mask, the whatever it is they're doing. And, there's a certain kind of segment of society in the Caribbean where there's them people behind the bridge, over the hill, whatever. But that's the belly of the society. And truly that they kept the torch alive so that we could have something. Right? And even when you look at here in North America and you start thinking about rap music, I'm not talking about what they're singing now, but that rap in its essence and that protest music and that activist music and let's rabble rouse because you know what, we getting left behind. That sometimes, we pay scant courtesy to those trailblazers, right? So what I learned about my mothers was that my mothers were trailblazers. They were brave women. They were teachers. And they were legacy builders. And I don't think that many times that we can even hold a candle to those women, what they had to endure and what they left for us. And many times I feel as though we don't appreciate what they did.
I want to go back just briefly to the True Nanny Diaries. What did you learn while writing this? What did you learn about yourself as a mother while writing this?
As a mother, I don't know if I learned anything as a mother. I did learn a lot about myself. One of the things I learned in the character, the protagonist, is Valdi. And basically her story is that she came here to do her master's and she lost her scholarship. And she said, I'll babysit for a little while until I get the money to go back to school, right? She was bright. She was in Colombia. And 20 years later, she's still on the playground trying to put that derailed dream back together. Still on the playground, still undocumented, still wanting to go back to school, right? But one of the things I learned is that we cannot have fear. We cannot have fear. We cannot allow and I know people say this all the time, but truly, I own the fact that you cannot allow whatever your circumstances are to dictate who you are. Right? Because with the protagonist, Valdi, she didn't tell anybody when she was undocumented because she was embarrassed about it. She was fearful about it. So that thing that happened to her ended up being who she was. So that her struggle, and even when the book ends, there's still a kind of question mark as to, you think it looks hopeful that she's going to go away, a good way, a way that can release her from that shackle of undocumentation, but you're not sure. Right? So that's what I learned in that.
If there's a bucket list, what are two things you're craving to do?
Go to the continent of Africa. And makes sense. Go to the continent of Africa and see my daughter achieve her dreams.
I'm gonna ask you some rapid fire questions, right? Just maybe 3 or 4. If there's one pervasive message in your writing, how would you describe this common thread, and what satisfaction does it give you to be able to write as you do?
Know your history. Know your history, preserve your history, and own your history. And that's the satisfaction right there.
I like that. As a writer for some of the most prominent newspapers and magazines in Toronto, Canada, what did you find fulfilling in your role as a writer?
What was fulfilling to me was to see how you can really, I could really change things. I can think of at least 3 instances where just me writing change things. I'll just give one example. The Jamaican Canadian Center, they got a piece of land. There's a whole bunch of city problems and whatever. And writing relentlessly for weeks changed things. They got their zoning, all the roadblocks that was, being put up meant that now there was a big community center that belonged to the community, right? So that's what.
You became a student activist, writer activist, or activist writer in the 80s and so on. How, in your opinion, did becoming an activist writer help you grow as a writer and as a woman?
As a writer, it helped me grow because you're writing all the time.
Right.
So when I worked for Share, for example, like it's 4 or 5 articles when the week come, that was standard. So really you had to write and you had to learn. You had to learn your community and learn about every single issue there was. I wasn't like, on the political desk. I was on every desk. So I wrote an entertainment, politics, really, whatever it is, I did that. So I really got to know the community and know the players of the community. So that was important. And as writing as a woman, what did I learn as a woman? I got to learn about some very strong women and interact with them and learn from them. Like, for example, Jean Augustine. She's a Grenadian woman who came to Toronto as a domestic worker. And she became an MP, the first black woman MP in Canada. I worked on her campaign as well. So I got to learn about trailblazing women from the 50s and from the 40s and from the 60s, like actually living history at the time. So
Do you have any female heroes?
in terms of like historical figures,
Well, any.
historical, who I call Zora Neale Hurston, I consider her my literary mother. Right? So I'm because what I like too that she wrote in her language.
Yeah.
And I think, as for she's just my hero.
Anyone?
Rita Cox. I don't have really have too many political heroes. The people I like in terms of women are generally writers.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What still surprises you about yourself as a writer?
That I can write. And that when I'm disciplined, what can come out. Writing is interesting because in many ways you are truly just the vehicle.
Right.
Right? Because sometimes what used to get me, especially with the True Nanny Diaries, I would be writing and then it didn't come in my head, but something is happening and I said, oh my God, that is so funny. Oh, I can't believe she did that. Right? So that you really realize that you are just almost like a typist. I'll tell you one thing. The character Monica in the novel, she is a babysitter as well. She is Jamaican. But I was writing her and I wasn't getting that voice at all. So she was the struggle. Get down to the end. And it hit me. And I said, Monica, now you're going to tell me that? I'm like, to the end, now you're going to tell me? And what did I hear in my voice? Me a Jamaican. Because I didn't write her as a Jamaican. So when I get to the end, she let me know that the problem I was having with her voice is because I didn't write her. I didn't realize she was a Jamaican. So I went back and I made her a Jamaican, but I still feel that she is the most underdeveloped character in the novel because I didn't take her on a journey from the beginning, the essence of who she is to the end. But she told me very late and it was,
usually only writers get this. But what does happiness mean to you?
Being, and that's a work in progress for me, being true to who I am. And again, sometimes things sound so cliche, but really and truly is to just live my own life without like fear or wonder or even thought about what other people think. Because I think that thing is what has held me back. Worrying about, about people and what they might say and what this one might say, whether it's family, whether it's whatever. So if I could live an authentic life according to the path that I came here to do, if I could just be me and just not worry about.
You think this is a Caribbean thing that we grew up with, that somehow we are handed this? You worrying about what people say, what people think, who would tantalize you, who would laugh at you. You think this is...
There's a psychosis there.
Yes.
In terms of how we grow, because the neighbors and, a simple thing as, in the night, Christmas night, you're not putting up your curtains until it's dark because you want it to show off for the neighbors. So there's a certain with all that. There's a certain pretension in the society,
Yes. Yes.
and then also in my generation, my growing up with my aunt, I was in early 70s as a child growing up. I grew up in fear. I was abused, so I grew up to fear the people who I should trust. So when you grow up with that sort of thing where they feel that this is discipline, and you get exposed to certain things at an early age, those things can grow with you
Yes.
and grow bigger than you. So I have had to learn to try to break through that, and
Yeah.
so I'm still a work in progress.
It's quite cathartic when you get it. Someone was telling me, and I'm just gonna say this for a quick moment. Someone was telling me the other day that she didn't realize that when she was when she was growing up, she had this fear for her older siblings and some of the people, as you mentioned, that she should trust. And when one day she got it, when she realized that it was because they held guilt over her. She said she never felt comfortable saying no or saying yes or saying how she really felt, because there was this outpouring of guilt that people who are close to you become very comfortable and very adept at doing to make you feel guilty about being your true self. And she said the moment she got that, it was liberating. It was cathartic. It was like, oh my gosh, now I can conquer the world. To be able to say to someone close, no, I really can't, or I don't want to. And, without having to actually give a good reason. So, yes, it's interesting how where the flow takes us. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, see how the time goes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Said, suffer the little children to come unto me. Every day, more than 30,000 children around the world die of preventable diseases. More than 300,000 children are being used in war as child soldiers. Lord have mercy. A child should be loved. A child should be held. A child should be clean. A child shouldn't smell. A child shouldn't go to bed.
We are back with the lovely Nandi. Nandi, this quote: no matter our accomplishments, it does not give us the right to ignore the plight of our community. You coined that phrase, man. I love it. What do you think of when you hear that, and why does it resonate with you?
It resonates with me because for a long time I was so caught up in my own struggles, because it's rough. And when I say it's rough, I'm not just talking about me, but it's life is a journey, and many times it's a hard slow through. And what I realized is that I was so caught up in that I couldn't see that there are others who I could still help,
Yes.
right? And so it's not even only about accomplishments. It's accomplishments, but not. It's almost as though wherever you are in life, you still, doesn't matter, you can still extend a hand, right? And that's what I realized. And when I got that, it's so funny that all of a sudden, maybe I wasn't seeing it before, all these causes, people that I can help on a one-on-one basis, or even a larger issue, just started coming into my orbit. And there's a certain fulfillment that comes with exercising that, because it's the human thing to do.
Talking about fulfillment and orbit, if you have embraced your purpose, how are you convinced, either through your work or your interactions with people, that you were fulfilling that purpose?
I think the book, for example, when I meet domestic workers who maybe I go to a book fair or I go whatever and, oh, I read your book, but not that. I've had women weeping because they were so happy that I told their story. You know, that tells me something that I gave, like I was able to be a vehicle through which a voice could be heard.
Yes.
Right, so something like that, and maybe even the simplest thing, like right now I'm with a organization that's raising funds for a very very poor woman in St. Vincent. Her name is Sandra Neverson, but she has a growth on the side of her face this big, so all her bones are being displaced. She's in constant pain, and we're trying to raise $35,000 to bring her to Kings County to have surgery. Right, that when you hear the gratitude in her voice, not because she'll be able, we're trying to bring her, she can have the surgery, that somebody remembered her. That she was selected, she seemed like divine, and like God selected her, selected us to help her. You know that there's much to do. There's much to do, and we all have to do our part.
Talking about that, is there a particular religious or spiritual compass or a set of principles that help to guide you day to day that you can share with us?
Yeah, for a long time, I've because I grew up in the church. For a little while, I checked out Islam, to see if that's, because I always felt with Christianity, I've always felt as though I cannot be who I am, and I cannot read the Bible selectively. I cannot ignore how the Bible has been used in terms of colonizing, in terms of the oppression of African people. But that's just me. I'm also, I should say, I'm a firm principle of live and let live, that everybody has their journey, everybody has the way they see things, and what speaks to them, and what how they communicate spiritually. So whoever is, that's their thing, then that's okay, but it's not mine. So the peace I've found in terms of, I am a practitioner of Ifa, so I follow African sacred science. And that helps me, that guides me, because I can see myself in my practice.
That's
in my
important.
belief system. Yeah.
That is important. What is one thing about you most people do not know that you believe will surprise them?
Maybe I haven't found that out. that because I'm still working through it. That I'm a very like fear is something that I live with. Because many people, I guess I don't come off like that, but it's big. It's big, and it's a constant struggle to rid myself of that.
What do you think? What do you think this fear, this entity? Why do you think it comes to that particular trough? Why do you think it comes to you to feed?
Because it's always had a home.
Always at a home.
Since I was little, that displacement. And again, I'm saying that you leave, you're very, very young. You live in a domestic situation where your parents were physical with each other. And then your mother disappears when she's 2. And then you leave and you go to new people at 5 in a strange country. And then you're the other, because, you're the one who doesn't have the parents. And then the family is not really warm. And then, so I've always been transient and not really sure of what that place is. So then that happens, and then you go on to meet the father at 16, but then he's not the hero. He's not to say he's not a hero, but he's not the hero that you created in your story. So then that's a whole other different kettle of fish that you have to be navigating throughout there. So yeah, so there's been a lot of that. So I think it is that because I've always, when I was a vulnerable vessel in terms of being a child and that sort of thing, and you you're totally inculcating that and entertaining that because it's what you know and what you learn, and that it's hard to shake. So it's, as I said, when I say that I like where I am now, it's because for the first time I can see that it's okay to be myself, to have my own views, and that I don't have to let other people, irrespective of who it is, spouse, define me. But even though I've come to that realization, and like what you were saying earlier about your friend, knowing that once she got that, she was liberated. Mine did not, it's not an instantaneous thing. It's that every single day, in every single moment, in every single decision, I have to conquer it again, over and over. So it's not like sitting down like this. This is not a fearful situation. I can talk, I can,
Right.
but it's like in the moments that truly define you, how you live, where you live. That's those decisions. That's it's always there.
It's like if there is a Nandi asking Nandi for permission to be.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
It's
If
big.
you had an opportunity, really, to speak to this fear, right, this entity, what would you say?
I would probably try to figure out, like, ask it, like, why me? Because it's funny that even though I say it goes back to, the childhood thing, and I don't, again, sometimes I find myself, like, I talk in cliches, but I don't really like the cliches. But that, okay, I would look at it like this. I would say to the fear, I would say, like, or say to myself about the fear, that another 9-year-old, another 5-year-old in my situation might have run away. But I took it, and I took it, for a long time, 16, 17, 18, and then into my whole adult life. So I would maybe have maybe that's something I can do. Sit down and have an interview with it and ask it, like, what is it about me that you don't want to let go? Like, why are you so in love with me?
Or why do you think I'm in love with
Or why do
you?
you think I'm in love with you? You understand what I mean?
What is the one play you were craving to write?
Oh, I have it already.
Oh, you do? Huh?
I haven't written it yet, but it's a one-woman play. And again, because it has been so personal to me personally, and to other people I've met, and to family members and the Caribbean community in the whole, and we're not part of that immigration conversation, by the way, because we're still in the shadows.
Yes.
Right, of the conversation. It's about a woman who gets her green card she lives here for like 25 years, and she gets her green card at the age of 65. So it's kind of like, what do I do with this now? Why I haven't really written it yet is because, I do not know, because people want to have hope in circumstances, but I haven't yet figured out, maybe if I start writing it, it's going to work out. But I haven't figured out, like, what is the hope in that story. I know the parameters. One day it comes, and here it is. She signed the paper. She has a green card now. But, like, 25 years is lost. What did she do with that time? And does it matter that she has this now? I mean, she probably could go home, and she hasn't been. But, like, what else?
Well, if the analogy that comes to mind is starting off at the base of a mountain, and there's a promise at the top. You're not sure exactly what this promise is going to do for you, but you keep climbing because you're hoping that you will reach there and you'll get it. And then when you get it, you discovered something. You discovered it was not about what it will do for you, but how it will use you as an instrument to do for others.
And I think that when I write that play, I think that will be the most important thing that I have done in terms of literature and
Wow.
writing.
Wow.
I feel it, but I have not yet. I think I've jotted some notes down the other day.
You're gonna do it.
But I haven't gotten to it yet. Maybe it's a fear thing. I don't know. But I haven't. Not fear in the same way that I just described it.
I know.
But it's almost like the discovery.
Yes.
Like when you discover that, I mean, can you take it? Yeah.
You can, Nandi. You can.
Okay.
Right? You can. I think sometimes perhaps you don't allow yourself, and I sometimes am guilty of that. Because I have very good friends. Extremely good friends, few, that give me the opportunity to journey into my journey. Because on my own I wouldn't do it. On my own I would not say that I can do certain things. It's those people that I believe have been placed there to remind me
Of who
of
you
who
are.
I am and what I can do. Because on my own, I would dare not. I would dare not look, reflect, and say, well, you know what? You can write, or you can do this, or you can do that. So these people are there, and it's a journey, it's a process, and I believe you can. I believe you have it in you, right? I know. Look at Flambeau and all these wonderful things, and with that, I want to ask you this: what is the most gratifying article you've ever written, and what did it do for you?
Ah, it's a human story. When I was working for Share, there was I used to do this column called People and Places. It was supposed to be an entertainment column, but then I found so much meaning in it. As I used to go to the homes and of ordinary people and just talk to people, and auntie who was 95 years and get that thing. Then one day, this guy called me and he said, I have not seen my brother in 52 years. His brother went to England, and he asked me if I could come and meet them at the airport. It was a twin, sorry. Twin brothers separated 52 years. And I was there for the meeting, and then I followed their whole journey for a few weeks while the brother was visiting in Canada. That to me, though I've done a lot of other stuff more in, you know, not exciting, but more dramatic articles and all that sort of thing. That human moment and that discovery of that twin brother, that to me had meaning.
When are you most happy?
when I'm with my daughter.
Um, what kind of music calms you down?
Soca.
Soca calms you
Calypso,
down.
calypso, calypso. That's soca, calypso.
Calypso. What is gratifying about being Nandi? Come on.
Be a Nandi. Be a Nandi.
Being Nandi. Okay. Looking back, if you had a chance to change anything about your education or your approach to life, what would you change?
I would spend more time. I would education. I would try harder with math.
Math.
Yeah, I would try harder with math because I actually want forensic science, but I didn't have the patience for the math. The science, yes, but not the math.
Not the math.
Yeah.
Um, what stories would your father always tell about you? Sorry.
It's a bad story. When I was a teenager, about 21 or whatever, I put a ticket on his Visa card and I went through the for Carnival. It's not a positive story, but it's his favorite.
Um, is there a particular story your daughter always tells about you?
What does she talk about? Oh, she talks about that since she was 2, I always told her, I said, you're going to go to Brown Science and you're going to go to Oxford or Harvard and you're going to go on scholarship because mommy's not paying for you to go to school. And she's in Bronx Science, by the way.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
What are you most proud of?
My daughter.
What is the one thing Nandi cannot do without?
I don't know.
Okay. Finish this sentence. I look forward to Sunday evenings
To sleep.
to sleep. Have we seen the best of Nandi?
No.
What advice do you give for young people who are pursuing a career in writing?
Write every day.
Write every day, yes. What are you most thankful for?
Life. And the opportunity to do better in every new moment.
Tell us a bit about what you're working on, as briefly as possible. what you're working on at the moment, if you can share.
Yeah, I'm doing just tidying up a couple of things with Flambeau still,
Okay.
and yeah, I'm reading a lot. I'm not writing actively right now.
I'm going to ask you this question here. It might be unfair, but I will because
Okay.
you know I just admire your intellect. In your interactions with blacks from various parts of the diaspora, the black diaspora, you must have encountered some cultural differences and similarities. But um, what what similarities stood out that you believe is a glue that can bring us together or hold us together?
I think our conversations, the way the manner of which the manner in which we speak, what we speak about, and of we have a sort of shared value system, believe it or not. Because like when I speak to Africans from the continent, the way they look at family, the way they look at their elders, right? You see a lot of who we are. It got watered down a lot in the North American experience, but you can see the road. You can walk that road and go straight back to where that came from, right? So even though we have, because of enslavement and what we bought into and what was forced upon us, we have departed in many ways, but the root, the tree, the branches is still, they're still attached to the root, right? So I believe wherever we go, music, culture, it's all there. It's so organic. It's so obvious that I don't know why we even pay attention to the differences. It's just different ways of expressing what's in here.
I like that. I'm glad I asked that question. If you could go back in time, what would you tell your 16-year-old self?
Have no fear. It's a new dawn. It's a new moment. You can do anything you want, right? Just listen to yourself. Follow your ori, as they say in Yoruba. Follow this. That's the most important thing that can take you through.
And the question I ask every guest, what makes you laugh out loud?
People. People, literature, life, paradox, idiosyncrasy, just the strangeness of it all.
Yes, yes. Yes, paradoxes and idiosyncrasies and ironies. Life is filled with them. Creates drama
Yeah.
and comedy. Yes. I never heard anybody say that, but yes. That's what makes life interesting.
Yeah.
Nandi, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on CWS. You are now officially a woman of CWS. So I am going to invite you to come back on at some point. And really seriously think, I'm serious about this, about a few members of your cast to come on and share with us, some of their life's experiences, but especially about the play and what it means to them and what they believe it means to the Caribbean people or black people and as a vehicle for as a vehicle, what is the message and how does that message impact them and their families and so on. I think it's a good thing.
If I could just say one last thing, my
Sure.
cast, funny enough, because of just the pool that we're working with, a lot of them are African American, and I had an issue with that at first because I just always feel like when it's from the diaspora, it's always African American gets the part, but they owned it so much that I didn't even feel any disconnection. So that's something I learned from there. And not only that, they were able, even my audience, to say, you know what? I know we had enslavement, but I didn't get that you all experienced the same thing in the Caribbean. That one of the lines in the play is, all are we is one. The only difference is cane and cotton. So that milieu, we were able to bring that and to be able to explain that message that, again, as I always say, all are we is one.
I like that. I really enjoyed this tonight.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here.
Thank you. What surprised you, if anything, about CWS?
How quickly the time passed. and that I have never. I mean, it might not seem. I don't know what it came over like, but I've never really been so personal. Felt so personal about an interview.
Wow. Did you enjoy it?
It was. Yes, I did enjoy it, but it sort of like I know it's gonna leave me thinking later on today. I'll be
So,
thinking for a while, so it's good.
good. Very good. I am glad. And you have to tell that fear, I am in charge.
I will.
All right, Nandi. Good night.
Good night.
Arrowhead, I love my golden arrowhead. I don't think you heard me. I said arrowhead, I love my golden arrowhead. Mama, mama, oh Gigi, my